Hi, and thank you for joining me. I was thinking about what to make my next video about, and I figured a little hands on time was in order. So I thought I'd show you my book collection. I will also detail books that I have read as long as I can remember them and that I don't own. Okay, so thought I'd kick it off with one of my favorite books, Ready Player One. Now, this book is authored by Ernest Klein. Ernest Klein. And it's possibly one of, no, it is my favorite recently. It's set in the future. It's not really post apocalyptic or anything, but it is set in a world where virtual reality has taken over, and it's scarily close to our future. And it follows a character named Wade, who is trying to be the first to solve a series of puzzles which will grant him a lot of power and a lot of fortune, a lot of control over the company that is essentially controls the monopoly of the virtual reality kingdom. And this book is full of pop culture references. It's kind of Ernest Cline's specialty. This book was optioned, the rights, and Steven Spielberg, has been making it into a film. And it's actually got Simon Pegg, who plays a character named Og, the co-founder of the Oasis, which is the virtual reality kingdom. I believe they just about finished filming. Anyway, I must have read this book in like 2-3 days. It was so good. New York Times says it's enchanting. Willy Wonka meets the Matrix. next book, sorry, still getting over that cold I had a couple weeks ago. This next book is one that I didn't enjoy too much. Divergent. Written by Veronica Roth. And she's a great storyteller. It's just been mangled by a film franchise that has gone young adult and I don't know. It's about 4 factions. I can't even remember. I can't even remember the 4 factions. I didn't care for this book at all. It was a good read. I don't know, I feel like I've heard this story before in The Hunger Games. So, not much to say about it. The films are watchable, they do the book no justice. I have a tattoo on my back that covers most of this. The next book is a prequel to one of my favorite stories in video games, Halo: The Fall of Reach. Written by Eric Nyland. Now this franchise of books is written by a different author, each one. Each one of these books is, as you can see, written by someone else. And they pop in and out, but this story is unbelievable. It may have been a video game to start, but the world building that they have been able to do is unbelievable. I really like this book. I don't like the size of it. You see what I mean? It's super tiny. I don't like trying to hold on to tiny books and read them, especially when they're pretty thick. Oh, because of the last video that had my hands in it, people were asking what's wrong with my hands. Nothing. No, seriously. It's scar tissue on my knuckles, so I'm not going to let that be the reason why I never do do a hands-on video. So if it bothers you, I'm sorry. Just don't look at the video. This next book is probably my greatest love for the supernatural. It is The Whisper in Darkness by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, this book is called The Whisper in Darkness, but it is a collection of all of his short stories that are more specific to the Cthulhu mythos, and this book, this series of stories, is so powerful, so in depth and dark. It's been the basis for hundreds and, if not everything, supernatural to date. The problem with this style of writing is that it's very old. It's a very old English. And see if I can find an explanation. Can't even find an explanation. Or an example, I mean. It's very Lovecraftian. And that's not really a word. But anybody who's anybody should know. This book, it actually scares me, and to some degree, to think that so long ago, where we didn't have anything corrupting us, there was far less horror in the world, and to think that these things existed in someone's mind were unbelievable to such a level. Here's an example of the English. So, this is the case of Charles Dexter Ward, and this paragraph starts. Ward, however, would not be quizzed long in his vein. Modern and personal topics he waved aside quite summarily, whilst regarding antique affairs he soon showed the plainest boredom. Now, the word showed is Shewed. And the problem with reading one of these books is it's such a high level of English, such an advanced writing style, Old English, that it takes energy. It literally saps you of energy trying to read it. So I'll often read something like that and then put a few of the Ready Player One style books where it's a lot easier to read and calm things down a bit. Next, we have a book that I'm reading next. That's my next book I'm about to read, and it's called This Savage Song. I know absolutely nothing about this book other than the pamphlet on the inside was really intriguing, and the back of the book, the snippet, really got me. It reads, well, the author is Victoria Schwab. It reads, Corsal, tooth and claw, shadow and bone will eat you raw. Malachi, sharp and sly, smile and bite and drink you dry. Soon I cycle, sing you a song and steal your soul. Monsters, big and small, they're gonna come and eat you all. The tagline for the book is, "There's no such thing as safe." I'm fascinated with this book. It's also hardcover, and I highly prefer hardcover. So this next book is one that it's another one I couldn't put down. The Martian. Now, this is one of the original covers before it was a movie. This book, although I love the film, this book freaking blows the movie away. It's very mathematical, it's very science, but it's done in such a way and so plain that you're able to follow along and really embrace his story, almost feel like you're out there. I absolutely love this book. It's one of those ones where you get home from work and you've got to do nothing for like an hour and just read. I heard the film was coming out, and I had to read it again, or I had to read it for the first time in like 4 days before the movie came out. Okay. This next book is sci-fi, and I need this book to be a film. I just need it. It is so fun, so gripping. It's called Avalon, and it's about space pirates, essentially. Spaceship thieves. So, the main character, Jeff Seagrave, and his crew are essentially teenagers, and they have to find what's called metatech. It's what powers the future and powers, slipstream travel, time and space travel, and ships. And they're the best at it. And his main goal is to get back to his parents, and he needs that money to do it. So the book takes place on a few spaceships and in space, and the characters, although it's kind of a teenage book, the characters are so unique in each in their own way that I felt like I knew these people. I felt like if I never met them before, I could pick them out in a crowd. He ends up finding some information that both his boss, his crime lord boss, and the government need. And he knows he can wager for it. Something big. I highly suggest this book. The next book, Polaris, is the sequel to Avalon. This book is awesome. Straight sequel. It picks up right where the other one left off, and any questions you may have had are answered immediately. If you're going to read Avalon, I won't tell you much about this book, but it not only continues what the first had, but it brings in all new plausible story elements and plot mechanics that change the game without breaking the fantasy. This next one is from author Francesca Haig. No title on the front. It's called The Fire Sermon. This book kind of, I bought it because the cover looked cool, and the story blew me away. It takes place long, long after nuclear war, so far in the future that they've gone back to medieval workings, and anyone that was alive or is in a place of privilege that knows what happened doesn't tell anyone, and they use that to put pressure on the lower class. And the classes are split into two. So after nuclear warfare, the nuclear fallout eventually made it so that humans who got pregnant always gave birth to twins. And the twins were connected not physically, spiritually, and well, I guess physically, but not in the literal sense. If one twin were to get stabbed in the shoulder, the other twin would feel the heat and pain of it. If one twin were to die, the other would die. And one twin would always be born extremely healthy and strong. The other twin would be born with a defect, a short hand, or no leg, or be blind. And that twin, the defected twin, would be born into servitude to the strong twin. And as you can probably guess, that's where the story takes place. However, there's one problem is that the defected twin, the Omegas, the main character is an Omega, and she is born with no physical deformity. She has an ability of psychic foresight, and because she's not born with a physical defect, it takes many years before they're split. And her brother gets born into power and eventually becomes the ruler of the kingdom. So she becomes a catalyst to his demise, as he doesn't want to die, so he captures his sister so that no one can kill her and puts her in prison. And adventure ensues, and the story goes from there. It's very interesting. I love it. I'm waiting for the sequel. This book was optioned for film rights. Now this next book, Armada by Ernest Cline, is his second book, and it's very good. It's not great, but it's definitely readable. It just follows a kid who's so damn good at video games. When the story picks up, it turns out the government has been using this video game that he's good at as a recruiting tool and been modeling the story of the video game after the real world aliens that the government is hiding from the world, and he becomes a pilot. It's not bad. Okay. See if I can get these all in one shot. If you can't tell by now, it's the Maze Runner story. So, Maze Runner it's now a film franchise, but this book is about some kids that wake up. It's a book with teens that's written with what's the term? Adult problems, adult imagery. It's pretty deep, actually. The one caveat I have is that in the book, the 2 to 3 or 4 of the main characters eventually can talk psychically in their mind, and they don't do that in the film. Also, the film for this book, Scorched Trials, was a mixture of this book. Half of what happened in Scorched Trials film is actually what was supposed to happen in the third book. So, I'm very curious, A, how James Dashner feels about that, and B, what the third film is going to be. Oh my gosh, my phone. The main actor in this film franchise fell off had his face all cut up, and they postponed the movie. So this book, The Kill Order, is a prequel to the entire series, and it follows the incident of where the virus first gets spread across the world before the scorch happens. And it's 10 times more brutal than The Maze Runner. It's a very graphic story. And there's a 5th book coming out to detail the steps right before the maze. Secondly, these books are awesome. So the next set is called Half Bad and Half Wild. Half Bad is, it's kind of like Harry Potter in the witches and wizardry world, but in this franchise, witches, or male and female, are both called witches. And when you turn of age, your parents have a ceremony in which you have to drink their blood, and they give you 3 gifts. These gifts, eventually, one becomes very unique to you, and it becomes your special power, your area of expertise, like potion making or medic or control over the weather. And occasionally you get a bad gift or a more offensive gift. So a white witch is a witch that uses her power for good or his power for good. And a black witch is a witch that gets like the ability to control fire or transfigure themselves into an animal. And then there is half codes, or witches that are children to both white and black parents. And the government, which is white witches, are trying to kill every black witch and half code in the world. And there's only a few left. And this book follows Nathan, who is a half code, and he's in search of his dad, who is a black witch, before the government kills him. This book is what happens after he finds out who his father is, if he meets his father, and his retaliation to the government. There's a third book, which I haven't read yet. It's very teen, this series. I didn't know how teen it was till I got in, but I was already in, so I said, why not read it? So this book is called Positive, and this is a book about after the apocalypse, obviously zombie apocalypse. There have been factions, road pirates, death cults, and cities have zoned themselves in to create small living worlds. And in this world, everyone who gets infected or comes in contact with infected blood has to be screened. And if they are positive, then they're not necessarily a zombie. In this world, the zombie virus can only be activated on someone who is 20 years and below, or who was at the inciting incident of the zombie breakout, and 20 years from there. The main character is not sick, and the book starts out with him getting sick. I won't tell you how because it's freaking amazing how it happens. But he does get some blood on him, and he is dubbed positive and has to trek his way across the US to a quarantine zone. But something happens, and this is his story. It took me by surprise how unique the story is. It's not what you think it is, trust me. So, once you're branded as a positive, everyone can see that, and you're treated as an outcast, so that comes into play. Highly suggest this book. Okay, so this book and this book and this book and this book are all books that I haven't read but were given to me, and I will read in time because I hear good things about Brandon Sanderson. And the last book is called Chimera. It's a trilogy of books. Come on. A trilogy of books, and you can see one's called Parasite, the second is called Symbiont, and the third is Chimera. This series is unbelievable, very adult, very science-based, post-apocalyptic world. As it's happening, it takes place in the States, where a medical company has found a way to manufacture tapeworms with DNA. And each tapeworm is genetically engineered specifically for each host. An actual tapeworm gives off, what's the word? I can't remember. It secretes stuff as it eats what you have in your stomach. So they've found a way to turn that into a positive. And the tapeworms find out how to chew their way up the spinal cord and into the brain and control the host. Essentially turning them into zombie-like creatures. Rage, very basic human function. The story follows a woman who was in a car accident and died, and she gets resuscitated miraculously. And she's inside the facility where these tapeworms are created. And this follows her story as it goes from one sleepwalker tapeworm to the entire world falling apart in book 3. And this has probably been one of my favorite books in the last couple of years. Highly, highly suggest this franchise. So that's all the books I own. I've read the Harry Potter franchise. I'm a Harry Potter freak. I love it. And I've read a franchise called The Diviners, which is amazing. It's in the Prohibition era, and it takes place, or it revolves around a series of adults and young adults that have special abilities. And it's very dark, it's very mature, deals with race issues, sex issues, gender, basically outcasts in that Prohibition era as evil descends on the town, I believe, of Chicago. Can't even remember off my head. I read a Douglas Adams novel called Shada. It's a Doctor Who story that was not, it was canon in the universe, but it was turned into a novel and instead of a TV show. And Douglas Adams is fantastic. But that's it. This video is hella long. It's crazy. So if you've made it this far, or maybe you skipped to see what the other books are, thank you for at least being interested. And I hope you subscribe, like or dislike the video. Comment below if you've read any of these. Tell me what you think. Let me know what your favorite novel is. And don't be afraid to start a conversation. Maybe suggest a novel for myself. So, thank you for watching, and I hope you have